Well, buckle up, Buttercup. It seems we very well may be walking headlong closer to that of World War III. And why could that possibly be? Well, escalation with Russia, of course, because apparently now it's been approved by Antony Blinken and others within that of the UK government that it's okay to use Storm Shadow missiles to fire deep within the Russian heartland. This is quite insane considering the nature of what escalation this represents. Of course, from the Ukrainian perspective, it is totally reasonable and understandable as to why it is they would want to strike deep within Russia itself. Totally understandable considering they have been within a hot conflict with this country for quite some time. But here's the deal. We need to think about this from the nature of escalation and total war, because with the United States and the West in conjunction with NATO being the ones to provide these armaments, what that means is we will be effectively assisting in striking directly into the Russian heartland. This is a major red line in the crossing of the Rubicon that will not be looked past by Vladimir Putin nor Russian citizens. So what do we pay attention to here? Well, Vladimir Putin's come forward and said that if these Storm Shadow missiles to be given from the West to Ukraine to be used and strike deep within Russia, what you will see is that the West and by proxy NATO and the United States empire itself will be in all-out and total war with Russia. Not a proxy war over Ukraine, you will be at war with the Russian people. And this is something that I found quite stunning, but something I also found interesting was that we've actually sent these missiles to Ukraine before. That's right. What we did was use them so that they could, I don't know, defend their own territory, though, not strike within Russia because of the fact of us being the ones who are giving them the capability to do so. If the United States is the one providing you the armaments that then cost the lives of Russian civilians or troops in Russian territory, you can see exactly why, within that of the Russian perspective, this will be total and all-out war and justification for complete and total escalation, not only with Ukraine, but with the West itself. Now let's go ahead and throw it into this clip of Vladimir Putin explaining how this is a red line that you simply cannot cross.
В последние дни мы видим и слышим, как на очень высоком уровне Великобритании и США муссируется тема о том, что киевский режим сможет наносить удар вглубь территории России западными вооружениями большой дальности. И, судя по всему, это решение либо вот-вот будет принято, либо, судя по всему, вообще уже принято. И эта вещь, конечно, экстраординарная. Хотелось попросить прокомментировать то, что происходит.
Происходит попытка подмены понятий. Потому что речь не идет о разрешении или запрете киевскому режиму наносить удары по российской территории. Он и так наносит с помощью беспилотных летательных аппаратов и другими средствами. Но когда речь идет об использовании высокоточного оружия большой дальности западного производства, это совершенно другая история. Дело в том, что я уже об этом говорил, и любые эксперты это подтвердят, и у нас, и на Западе. Наносить удары современными высокоточными системами большой дальности западного производства украинская армия не в состоянии. Она не может этого делать. Это возможно только с использованием разведданных со спутников, которыми Украина не располагает. Это данные только со спутников или Евросоюза, либо Соединенных Штатов, в общем, с натовских спутников. Это первое. Второе, и очень важное, может быть, ключевое, заключается в том, что полетные задания в эти ракетные системы могут, по сути, вносить только военнослужащие стран НАТО. Украинские военнослужащие делать это не могут. И поэтому речь идет не о том, чтобы разрешать украинскому режиму наносить удары по России этим оружием или не разрешать. Речь идет о том, чтобы принять решение о том, что страны НАТО напрямую участвуют в военном конфликте или нет. Если это решение будет принято, это будет означать не что иное, как прямое участие стран НАТО, Соединенных Штатов, европейских стран в войне на Украине. Это их прямое участие. И это уже, конечно, существенным образом меняет саму суть, саму природу конфликта. Это будет означать, что страны НАТО, США, европейские страны воюют с Россией. А если это так, то, имея в виду изменение самой сути этого конфликта, мы будем принимать соответствующие решения, исходя из тех угроз, которые нам будут создаваться.
Well, and there you have it. Here we see from the horse's mouth, or I guess in this case more so the tyrant, that there will be all-out and total escalation if you are to allow a missile provided by the West with the capabilities such as what we've been speaking about to fire off and land within Russian territory, possibly killing Russian civilians or troops, destroying Russian infrastructure. As seen, Vladimir Putin is stating this will represent total escalation of Russia against the West, NATO, and the United States, which is by all means something I am not looking forward to seeing. We already see the concept of wider war breaking out on so many different fronts. I do not like the idea of us goose-stepping our way into World War III. We see what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. We've got China and Taiwan. Israel and Palestine, with the crosshairs of the Muslim world now aiming upon Israel because of their actions in Palestine. We see the fact of the possibility of the United States breaking out in wider war with Iran because of the fomenting dissent between these two governments. We see the fact of, I don't know, Pakistan recently announcing a massive oil reserve that they've discovered, along with Venezuela doing the same. I wonder if we'll be seeing some actions over in countries similar to this, because of course, as you know, we need to go get that liquid dinosaur juice. Now let's go ahead and jump back to what we were talking about, though, with an understanding of what very well could push us into the concept of wider war, which would be that of armaments striking within the Russian heartland. Here we see from The Independent, what is a Storm Shadow cruise missile? The British weapon banned from use in Russia by Ukrainian troops. The missile carries a range of around 155 miles and is designed to evade detection despite flying low after being launched. Okay, let's go ahead and address this. One, this is like a 2,000-pound missile. Let's just take that off the board so you understand that. You can see here in the picture on your screen, it is a massive piece of equipment. Once again, we can see that I'm sure whoever creates this, which I'm not exactly understanding of which company, I believe it's actually a British-made missile, but nonetheless, I digress. My apologies. The thing that is so unbelievable about this is the nature of what this actually represents, which is an absolute power dynamic shift in the hands of Ukraine in many ways when it comes to the fact of dealing with long-range capabilities. And why would that be? So Russia does not have the same keyhole satellite technology that we have. They do not have the same infrastructure when it comes to their ability to detect incoming strikes in the same way that Western nations do, specifically the Five Eyes nations. And that means what? That they do not have an ability to stop even more of our rudimentary missiles that we would have the ability to fire within their territory, but this being something that can fly within 150 to 300 feet of ground level is something could escape even our own radars. Some of the most advanced technology that we have afoot to date that has been used in a combat zone. So what we can understand is not only does this represent something that could strike within the Russian heartland in a fucking heartbeat with no detection system being able to actually pick this up, this would be something that would totally shift the perspective of how the Russian people are viewing this conflict, and in doing so, they will activate behind the rally around the flag effect, just like we saw on 9/11, just like we saw on October 7th, and they'll be saying, we have to get them over there because they hit us over here. It will be the same exact justification, and it will only lead to turmoil, death, and destruction. Here we see from CNN Politics, Biden gives Ukraine permission to carry out limited strikes within Russia using U.S. weapons. Isn't that just interesting? Because you could see an article like this and immediately extrapolate outwards and think, oh, well, Vladimir Putin, he's already had things like this happen and he's just making a stink over nothing. But here's the deal. What we see here is this was crossing a line that had been drawn in the sand when it was allowed in May of 2024. So what we can understand is now we've seen another line drawn in the sand that is now being trampled on by the West. And that is exactly why Vladimir Putin has stated, if you do this, you will be at war with Russia and her people. It's quite obvious, but the thing that I find most intriguing is the way that I've seen arguments being framed online in reference to things such as this. Oh, well, we've already allowed something like this, so what's the big deal? Well, here's the big deal. These strikes that we're talking about that were happening by Ukraine within Russian territory that were limited strikes by all means, they were just along the border of Ukraine and Russia, just barely past Kharkiv. But no, that's not something we need to talk about. We can go ahead and avoid that and just say, well, this is something that's happened before, so clearly it's justified that we use this subversive hypersonic missile to get 155 miles into Russian territory and strike deep within the Russian heartland. I am not someone here who defends the actions of Russia and their invasion of Ukraine. I am someone who is only here to advocate for the fact that we bring this conflict to an end because the endless slaughter of people that are both innocent and guilty, whether it be the fact of them being soldiers on the ground or the politicians responsible, is something I would like to see avoided solely for the fact that those people who I would like to see held responsible and be cast into the dustbin of history would be those held responsible in the court of law and public opinion for the fact of their actions being willing to advocate for things that have led to the tyrannical conflict that we have seen pop off between Ukraine and Russia, that has led to the devastation of so many young men being slaughtered, whether they be Ukrainian or whether they be Russian. That doesn't matter to me. What matters is that so many people are dying and that I am sick and tired of the fucking brother wars. End the conflict, end the madness as it could have been done oh so long ago when we saw a peace deal that was being drafted in the very beginning of this conflict in March of 2022, within a month of Russia invading Ukraine. And what do we see? The West sends Boris Johnson to Ukraine to go scuttle that peace deal, and in doing so we've only seen the devastation that has fallen upon the Ukrainian people since then. Absolutely and utterly despicable. Moving on now, here we see from the New York Times, Biden poised to approve Ukraine's use of long-range Western weapons in Russia. So not only did we see the fact of these limited strikes before, but now we see that Biden is apparently poised to approve Ukraine's use of long-range Western weapons. And here's the deal, it actually wasn't even that of Joe Biden that was apparently doing this. No, because of course, as we know, certainly in the current era that Joe Biden's cognitive decline is in, he is not the person running the country. He is by no means the leader of the free world, because the deep state is running the quote-unquote free world. And what we know is that it was people like Antony Blinken that were consistently advocating for things such as this. And who do we have here but Antony Blinken, the noble and valiant servant of the deep state, in Kiev on September 11th, making sure that he can confirm to Ukraine that they will have the backing of the West as they fire Western armaments into Russian territory with the capability of killing Russian civilians and soldiers. Of course, as we know, Antony Blinken, the most valuable and dutiful servant of the deep state and the military-industrial complex, doing their bidding here as we see, as he so consistently does. Now here we see from Newsweek, Ukraine closes in on green light to strike Russia with long-range missiles. Ukraine is reportedly closing in on receiving permission from the US and the UK to strike territory deep inside Russia with supplied long-range weaponry. The reports come as Secretary of State Antony Blinken and British Secretary David Lammy were in Kiev this week, which marks the first joint visit of its kind for more than a decade. Well, of course, like I've stated, Antony Blinken being the one who's gone to Kiev, and then he ended up also going to Poland to try and convince some people within the Polish government and Polish lawmakers that this is an action that should be supported. And I must admit, to see the response of these Polish lawmakers and government officials was truly a sight to see.
Blinken, go home. Go home as soon as possible. Get lost. Get lost. We don't want you here. We don't want Polish people paying and dying for your wars. Thank you very much.
Well said, my man. My only issue with what he said is Blinken go home, because that brings him back to the shores of my nation. Send him to Israel or something. The thing that we need to go ahead and address here would be that this mindset that you see here, it's something that's growing in mass. The fact that we do not want to see our citizens be sacrificed on the chessboard of war, nor do we wish to see our nations impoverished to fund your endless projects abroad. That is exactly what we're seeing come from a litany of different countries, whether it be the United States or many of the people of the Five Eyes nations themselves are actually protesting the actions of their governments because they don't support the standards of what is being visited upon them and what they are then having to fund by proxy of being taxed by their government to support the actions of things like what we're seeing now unfold in Russia, which very well could lead into a wider war. And the thing that I would like to go ahead and close this out on is an understanding of what wider war would entail, which would effectively be the glassing of the entire planet, because we're talking about the two countries with the largest nuclear arsenals, and that of the United States and Russia. And because of this fact, it should be quite apparent as to why you don't want to see war break out between these nations. And because of this alone, and the nature of how Ukraine is effectively nothing more than a proxy for the US to fight Russia and bleed them dry, it is truly stunning to me that people within the corporate press would even write an article such as this. It's either the fact that they are so stupid that they can't conceive why it is that people are perceiving things the way they are, or they think you're so stupid that they can condition you in whatever fashion they desire. Here we see from the Financial Times why Ukraine's allies are divided over deep strikes into Russia. I don't know. Why may they be divided? Because they don't want to die by nuclear hellfire, perhaps, through the possibility of this breaking out into a wider conflict, as we see the West certainly doesn't seem to have any issues with. And by the West, obviously, we mean those within the upper echelon of the governments of many of these nations that are advocating for the policies that are leading to the escalatory factors such as what we've been covering. It's absolutely insane, but at the same time, you have to realize so are the people that rule over you, so this is quite on par. I'm going to go ahead and call it there. Thank you for watching. If you got this far, thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. Tell me where I'm wrong in the comment section down below. Stay lovely, stay great, and most importantly, my friends, as always, please go tell someone you love them. They matter. It's worth doing. They'll feel better because you said it, and you'll feel better because you told them. Peace out.